In a historic decision today, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that 5-4 that same-sex marriage is now legal in all 50 states. The ruling makes the bans in the remaining 14 states no longer enforceable. Natasha, this is a huge deal. I know it's very influential and can mean a lot to a lot of people. What do you think?
Yeah, it's an incredible moment in American history, and certainly it's a moment where I'm very proud to be an American. My husband this morning knew how anxious I was to hear the decision, and so he called me because I was on a walk with my young son, my 2.5-year-old son, and I was getting very excited, and he was getting very excited because he's a toddler, and that's what you do when your mom's excited, and explaining to him, and then I realized I don't have to explain this to him. He and his friends are going to grow up in a world where this is not an issue. They're going to grow up in a world where they can marry who they love. And that, for me, was such a moment of, aha, we've done this. Like, this is a fantastic moment for us. You know, watching and listening to people talk about it this morning, I've already heard people say, well, I'm going to be able to move. I'm going to be able to move in this country with my family, knowing that the legal definition of what that family is, of what my union is, isn't going to change. That's phenomenal. And then as we're celebrating this, too, I've seen people also paying a lot of respect to the people who fought for this over the years. And certainly even in the Denver community, I know Tim Gill, who formed the Tim Gill Foundation, sent something out this morning talking about when he started in '94, only 25% of the country supported this. Now 60% has, and the Supreme Court has made this decision. So, you know, props to everyone who has fought for this issue over time. It's really a great moment.
Yeah, David, I know it seems like a lot of people may feel like this is something that was right around the corner. It was already going to happen. Maybe the court just had to catch up. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think it was going to happen by the normal process of legislatures and voters choosing it. Obviously, the court accelerated it. It's interesting looking forward because it's going to have perhaps very big implications for a case that the Federal 10th Circuit Court of Appeals is going to be hearing, in which the briefing is going on right now. That's the case of Brown versus Buman from Utah, known as the Sister Wives case, and it's that family that is on the TV show. They won their case in federal district court in Utah, not for saying that Utah has to recognize our plural marriage as a marriage under state law. They simply said, don't prosecute us for bigamy under state law, because Utah has an unusual statute which says even cohabitation can be considered bigamy. So if you have 3 people who live together, you know, in a relationship, that's okay, and it's okay if you spend weekends with your mistress and weekdays with your wife under Utah's prosecutorial policies. But if you have that 3-way relationship and you say, I'm married to both of these people and I intend to take care of them for the rest of my lives and I feel obliged to them because I consider myself married even though it's not recognized by the state, well, then that's a crime in Utah. And so that will be before the 10th Circuit. What the Brown family is seeking is sort of what was granted by the Supreme Court in 2003, which in the Lawrence versus Texas, which is not to say the state has to legally recognize what you consider to be your marriage. It simply can't criminally prosecute you for your choice about who you love and who you live with.
Totally makes sense, but I hadn't even thought of that perspective. Yeah. Craig, I know you're the other lawyer at the table. What are your thoughts?
I'm thinking, boy, do we have an evolving Constitution and a Supreme Court that is activist. Now, I happen to be for gay marriage, and I believe that you should not discriminate against people based on immutable characteristics. And the Supreme Court would definitely intervene if somebody was denied the right to vote, for example, based on their gender, their race, or their religion. And to me, the right to marry is more important than the right to vote. If I had to give up one, I've never had my one vote really matter in an election. I'd say, give me the right to marry. So I celebrate that with my gay brothers and sisters. But at the same time, if we were going to original intent and the Founding Fathers, they certainly didn't contemplate gay marriage. And it seems like we have a mini legislature up there right now. It's a lot like Roe v. Wade, where I agree with the general policy, and if I was in the legislature, I would support it. But it is problematic that the Supreme Court seems to be making these rules, and there will be pushback, not so much in Colorado, because we're far from the days when we were called the hate state, but in other states there will be pushback. And I understand the arguments. We saw it with Scalia, who said it threatens our democracy. Kennedy was more about love and the things I talked about earlier, but really, what's the Supreme Court doing? They're just kind of making it up as it goes.
Well, I know, like what you said earlier, a lot of us are celebrating. Kara, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, like Natasha, I am just so happy. I spent this morning just being out of my mind happy for my LGBT brothers and sisters and friends and the community that I am so proud to love and have such deep respect for. And the notion of the whole generations of Americans coming up behind us now, never knowing anything, that kind of discrimination or having us become so far by leaps and bounds in so short of a time is just so exhilarating to me. And, you know, just thinking about the relatively short period of time in history that this has happened is really quite astonishing. You know, 24 years ago in Colorado, Coloradans passed Amendment 2, which was, you know, the amendment that would have prohibited gays and lesbians from being able to seek protections as a class, as a class. And so that, of course, was ruled unconstitutional, and just then fast forwarding 23 years later, last year at this time, the then Attorney General for the state of Colorado was still fighting to keep same-sex marriage out of Colorado. And so to have, you know, today's affirming ruling from the Supreme Court is just tremendous.